Greetings. We ran last night a combat demo for Runebearer. I thought it went decent. 3 characters, 6 goblins. Goblins were generally weaker than the characters, in the sense that they had lower stats. They did less damage. Um, there were 6 of them, so that's an advantage, but not enough to actually, um, manage against characters. Characters had some buffs from their alchemist, though they were a little bit spendy. They spent a lot of them. Um, they also have inspiration, whereas a lot of the enemies do not. So that's rerolls effectively. So though it was a little, I could have seen it going a different way had one of the characters gotten isolated. That's something you just don't want to do in Runebearer. Runebearer does reward numbers, and it rewards positioning and staying by your friends if possible. Um, but the fact that the characters had that much higher skills and did reasonably, higher damages in the D8s, D10s versus 2D6, say, range, and have better armor, meant they carried the day. So I thought it went okay. Uh, one thing to keep in mind. Again, combat is sort of fussy. We sort of like it that way. Our group, these folks. Well, I shouldn't say most of the people who I've played with for a long time have played a lot of Hero. Hero also can have fussy combat, uh, and you can see it in our round structure. We have actions and half actions as opposed to 2 action points, for instance. There's not that much difference between the two. Um, so a lot of that comes from Hero. We didn't even use and I didn't use some of the other bits which we could have used, combat maneuvers, which I'll pull up just for giggles. Like, there's a lot of maneuvers that you can do just by using a weapon. You can do an aim strike. You can do a strong strike. Um, so again, yep, that's a typo. There we go. So yeah, so there's even maneuvers you can do to take different bits. It's penalties for some advantage and so on. We'll get into more of that as we go, I think. But I thought that the fight went okay otherwise, and it took about 90 minutes, which if we were at the table, that fight would have taken 20 minutes at best, simply because with uh, with each character playing their own each player playing their own character, that usually goes pretty quick. I can resolve die rolls fairly quickly, 2 or 3 at a time. I will roll 3 d12s and go, okay, you're hit once, by these 3 goblins. Like, there's a lot of ways to streamline that at the table that are a lot harder on Roll20. And frankly, I mostly forget how to use Roll20. It's been a long time since I've played anything on Roll20. So that was a little bit of a clunky for me. So I thought it would be interesting. So one thing to keep. So in any case, I was happy with how it went, minus a little bit of Roll20 woes. I thought it at least highlighted the basics of the combat. Well, we rolled initiative. We re-rolled it when it was called for. The attacks, the degrading defenses. I thought it showed at least the basics of the fight, the wounds, and so on. One thing that I thought was sort of interesting is that, so one thing to keep in mind, currently at the table that I'm running, I have 8 PCs. I have 8 characters. And there are 8 players. There are 8 players that are crammed around my dining room table. In addition to that, this campaign is centered in a colony, a frontier town, and the goal is to have recurring NPCs that interact with characters, have other adventuring parties out and about, have rivals of PCs and so on. And oftentimes that is, and well, hold on, and let's go to the next thing, and keep in mind one of the characters is a noble and has 20 soldiers sitting in his barracks at his noble house in this colony, and so the weird part is I have 8 PCs, and I decided to run a game where it's possible that one or more of the PCs is bringing someone along. So keep in mind for this, even this first adventure, I have 9 characters in the fellowship that is going to head into the mountains, and we'll do a session or something where we'll do after action reports for you, so you can follow along. Um, but that's a lot. That's a lot of so imagine that goblin fight with 9 PCs. That would be 27 people on the battlefield. And that's what we're gonna be doing a lot of the time. So it's gonna be a challenge to say the least to keep things moving and keep everybody going, given the fact that we're running a reasonably crunchy, detailed combat game with modifiers and positions and facings, and things to keep track of, and things to do every round. We have to roll for fatigue every round. We have to write that kind of stuff. Um, so I think that's going to be super interesting. I think that's going to be a challenge. One thing that I do at the table on tabletop when we run combats is I steal very, very much from fourth edition the minion rules. In fourth edition's minions are characters which they're enemies that do about the same damage as a normal enemy, maybe less, but about the same. They do reasonable damage. They have a single hit point. One hit kills them, and so you can flood the battlefield with these things. And I use that a lot in my own table games in Runebearer. It's not maybe a specific rule. Maybe I want it to be. I don't know. But um, but I typically do something like I usually have. What I do is I put a single hit point number on some of them. So, for instance, the goblins that they faced last night. So take these mooks here. Now these guys were largely almost one hit anyway, just because of the way the wound system works and the damage the players were doing. These guys have 20 hit points and they have a 5 wound threshold, no armor, so 5 points wounds them. What I would probably do is up that by a couple points, say, oh, they have some armor or something, and say 7 points kills one of these guys. So as soon as you do 7, that guy's out of the fight. If you do less than 7, then that guy is impaired immediately, and then any amount of damage on him after the fact will kill him. So I usually call these 2-hit minions, right? So I'll just put a threshold. That guy's an 8-hit point minion, and I'll just write it down on my sheet. He's 8 hit points. Then I have a ton of these little dice that one of my players brings, these little 6-siders. They're tiny, tiny, tiny things. You would need tweezers to pick them up half the time. If my fingers get any fatter, then I will. But and what I do is someone comes, they roll, and they say, oh, I did 8 hit points. Bam, that guy's off the board. He just dies. He goes down here. He flees, or he crumbles unconscious, or whatever. But he's gone. If he does 4 hit points, oh, I did 4. I go, okay, well, that didn't quite take him out. He's obviously shaken, though. I put a die next to him. That guy now takes 1 more hit point, and he's out of the fight. And he is at a -1 or something for everything. And I can put 20 of those on the battlefield. It's almost no bookkeeping for me. And it's almost no bookkeeping for me. And it makes the players feel very powerful because they can mow through some dudes. It makes the big guys more meaningful because I might only have a handful of them now, but the battlefield's being clogged up with these minions. And it makes area of effect attacks, which we don't have a ton of. And we, very few at the early levels, typically mages have to get to the next tier of spells before they start seeing big area of effect attacks. But once they do, they'll be able to cut through these things in way faster than the rest of the characters. So it also gives, mages, which honestly tend to lag behind fighters early in Runebearer quite a bit. Um, and they get their game changers as they go to tier 2 and tier 3, and then tier 4 is sort of silly, like all mages are. Tier 4 can be rather silly, but I've very rarely ever seen that happen, strangely enough. But anyway, so that's what one of the things we do. We use minions quite a bit. Another thing I say that I do, and I didn't do it in this fight, but I typically do it, I roll group initiative. So, you know, minions will largely, in a clump, will have the same initiative. These guys will have the same initiative. These guys will have the same initiative. The named big guys might have their own initiatives, and so on. So I can just have like either a note card over here, lay one over here, lay one over here, lay one over here, or I use the D12s that I have a bucket of to go and put their initiative numbers on right beside them. And we tend to be a little loosey goosey with initiative, because usually what I'll do is I'll go, well, my highest number is a 10. Who's higher than a 10? A bunch of players will raise their hands, and I say, okay, you guys go. I don't care what order. You guys go. I don't care what your number is, but you're higher than 10, so you guys go. And then my 10s will go. And then I'll go, what's my next number? 7s. Who's higher than a 7? 2 people raise their hand. Okay, you 2 figure it out. You go. And then they go. And so it usually, instead of counting down and everybody being in an order, because we have 8 people at the table, it's usually just I count down my 3 or 4 numbers, and then they just go in clumps, right? And then I go for a clump, and then they go for a clump, and I go, and they go, and so on, and then we're all moved, and we go. Another thing that I do at the table now, keep in mind that some of those concepts that we saw in our in the battle last night are new. Shock is new. Fatigue is new with this version, and I'm just trying it out. I do not fatigue monsters typically, just because it's a lot more putzing and bookkeeping now. And if I'm using a bunch of minions that are one-hit minions, keeping track of their fatigue is not that useful anyway. So I might do it on the big guys, the big named guys, because those are interesting villains, and I feel that they need to have an accounting the same way the players have an accounting. But for just the putzes, like I said, I'm gonna have 20 characters to run in a fight, maybe. That's a lot of dudes to run. I probably am not going to keep super close track of the 2 hit points that he took for fatigue or whatever. I'm only to keep track of the big stuff is my guess. It's going to be just too much. Anything else for fights? No, that was just I ran it. I'm a little jazzed about it. Sort of happy. I thought it did decent. What we didn't do, there's a lot of things we didn't sort of deal with in there. I think our poor alchemist got screwed because his throw was way too low. Even though he's going against, even though he ends up going against people's dodges, which are sort of crappy, his muscle is low enough that his throwing skill is pretty bad. So I should think about that a little bit. Maybe make the alchemist's throwing different, since in your template we can make the stats whatever we want on that. Something to think about though. But poor Arthur did pretty poorly, I thought. Now his buffs saved the day, I thought, pretty well, in that he definitely saved at least one character a head wound. So I thought that was pretty good. But we'll take a look at that, and we'll actually go into magic, I think. We had no casters other than Arthur in that fight, so we'll definitely have to do a fight with a caster, just to sort of work that in so you can see it. Is there anything else going on? No, I got to get this combat thing finished, and I'll post it as soon as it's finished. I just wanted to chat for a little bit, and especially talk about sort of the weird situation I'm in, which is I have 8 players. So those kind of fights for 8 guys, every battle's a mass combat at my table. Sort of, it's a weird weird vibe. Every battle is a giant set piece. There are very few tiny fights, um, if any, tiny fights. Every combat is an epic fight. So we have to really, really work hard and keep it moving to make it so that that fight is not the entire night. We have to move it along, and we typically we've done a good job so far. We've had 3 fights in the game. One was sort of ill thought on my part. Um, you know. Oh, the other thing, by the way, and this is sort of the other thing that I do, um, which is also I think important generally for almost every game, is let the fight end when it's over. Don't drag it out till the very end where every character has to fight to the death. Like once that decision point is reached and the GM goes, yeah, I think this is mostly done. Um, just tell the players, just go, hey guys, you've killed 3 of the 6 of them. The other 3 are going to bolt, and then they flee. Um, or even go, hey, you just mop up, done. You know, right? Uh, and just let it stop. Don't grind it out to the end. Every NPC is not a fanatic. They're not going to fight to the death. They're not tireless. Every NPC. So that's one thing that sort of counteracts that fatigue is that not rolling fatigue for the monsters is they have sort of a morale tipping point a little bit that you go, I think this battle's over, you win, they take off kind of thing. That also speeds fights up too because you don't have to go 10 rounds. You may only have to go 6 rounds to get a decision point. And the last 4 rounds are dull anyway because the decision's not in question. It's literally, are any of the characters going to get unluckily wounded in some stupid, fighting the last guy, which is sort of what happened in that fight. If at some point I'm like, yeah, I should probably make these guys run, but I didn't. And Max got smacked in the head once and took the most damage he took all night in one shot. And you're like, yeah, that would suck if you had a fight which was mostly over, but you were fighting to the death, and this one guy gets some lucky shot and then caps one of your players. Now, maybe that's realistic, in a sense, and gritty. Oh, see, combat sucks because at any time you could be bored to tears, though. But typically, and the only thing you've done is then sucked the wind out of that session. So that's the other thing that we do that I do. I gotta stop saying do on uh, all the Beavis and Butthead fans are out there chuckling to themselves. But that's something that we do at the table too to make these fights shorter is just end them when it's time. So, and those are all things we're going to have to use here. And that's it. So that lasted, I dragged that out way too long. So anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for indulging me. I don't know what I'm going to do tonight's stream, but we'll figure something out. So thanks a lot. I'll talk to you later. Bye bye.